Cursing. Jay.
J.K. Live. Not straight, no J.K. Live. Not straight, no J.K. Live.
Good evening, everybody. I'm live? Well, if I'm live, let me tell you guys something. So we got a new camera guy, and I'm going to tell you what he's doing. He's over here doing like this. Like, I don't speak sign language. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jay King. Welcome to Jay King Live. Today, we are in some interesting times. 2020 has been an interesting year. From the death of Kobe Bryant to the coronavirus, from the murder of George Floyd to the election campaign for president. We've had a myriad of conversations that deal with justice for all Americans, in particular Americans of African descent. And the conversation has been brewing since the Democratic process of trying to find out who would be the Democratic nominee. And the idea of reparations came up in a lot of these conversations. And with that conversation of reparations comes, what would African Americans do with the money if they had it? As a matter of fact, there are a lot of African American leaders who feel like we shouldn't give money to the African American community because they wouldn't know what to do with the money, they would probably waste the money, blah, blah, blah. And none of that means anything to me. There's a debt owed to African Americans, Americans of African descent, American descendants of slaves, for the crimes committed against us post-slavery. But if we receive that debt, what would we do? How would we maneuver? Are we financially literate enough to control hundreds of thousands of dollars that could possibly come to each one of us for the crimes committed against us by this government for simply being black? Well, today we have a conversation about financial literacy. And if you've been here with us before, you know how to conversation. So today, we're going to discuss financial literacy in the black community. And we're going to do it right here live. Straight, no chaser.
J.K. Live. Not straight, no J.K. Live. Not straight, no chaser.
Straight, no chaser. Straight, no chaser. Straight,
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So again, welcome to J. King Live, Straight No Chaser. When we start talking about financial literacy in our community, it's a conversation that you have to have in baby steps, because sometimes you can offend people by telling them that they're financially illiterate. I know that I have been most of my adult life financially illiterate. I didn't understand money, how it works. I just knew how to make money, and I knew how to spend it. But when it came time to making my money work for me, I was not necessarily profound at that part. But I think we can all say that. I mean, if we're going to be honest. And this is the conversation that we're going to have today. It's going to be an honest conversation about financial literacy in the black community and what would have happened today had we been financially literate, had that been a conversation at our table, whether it was the dinner table, the breakfast table, or the domino table. Just the fact that we started talking about finances, the stock market, investments, and savings. So today with me is David Fontaine. I'm hoping that we have everything in order here. And if we do, are we all right? Cameraman? Yo, are we all right? I got to make sure that he's got this locked in. This is his book, The Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible. Are we locked in there? Can people see it? Okay, so this is Dave Fontaine. He's my guest today. Dave, you have written the Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible for individual, family, and community empowerment. What made you make it a Bible?
Well, Jay, I was brought up the son of a minister. I'm a preacher's son.
Okay.
And a preacher that built a church right onto his house in Del Paso Heights, being raised. And so, being a preacher's kid, of course, there's certain fundamental principles that are instilled in you. Do unto others as you have them do unto you. I am my brother's keeper. Those kind of principles that was instilled to me religiously, my religion, by my dad, by my mother. And I didn't always follow those 10 religious principles, the 10 commandments. I didn't always abide by them, but they were always there. And so as a result of that, as I ventured into the business world, and more so, especially when I got into as a financial advisor, advising clients on investing and savings, whether in real estate or stocks or bonds or what have you, I found that there were certain successful principles that, if applied correctly, you could grow your wealth. You could be wealthy. Mm-hmm. You could provide a good living for your family. You could retire early. You could, finance your sons and daughters' college education without going into debt. But to be frank with you, Jay, these are things that were not taught to me either. Financial literacy, we're taught academic education, professional education, but nobody's taught financial literacy education in our schools. So nobody gets that.
How did you get in finance then? How did you weren't taught it, it wasn't spoken at the table. How did you get into the finance business?
Well, my dad was in business,
okay,
and he worked for himself. And I always knew that I wanted to work for myself and have my own, wanted to work for myself and have the freedom of working by myself, because I didn't really like anybody telling me what to do. And I realized that there was a greater financial opportunity in working for yourself. Mm-hmm. 80% of all millionaires in this country are self-employed individuals. So I realized if I was going to have financial freedom and have a successful life and be able to do the things and have the options that I wanted to have, that I had to have wealth.
80% of millionaires
are small business owners. That's
80%.
80% of them.
So that's 8 out of 10.
Yes, 8 out of 10.
And so when you look at small business owners in the black community, 95% of them are sole proprietors.
That's correct, Jay.
So they don't have the wherewithal to grow to that millionaire status as a part of that 80%. We make up less than 1% of the market, right?
Correct. About 2%, yeah.
I'm talking even in the stock market?
In the stock market, 1.5%, 2%, somewhere in that.
But we're 14% of the population.
Correct.
Why do you think that is?
Well, Jay, it's a matter of our history. If you look back at the civil rights movement, we came out of slavery, 400 years in this country, 250 years under Jim Crow's separate but equal, covert, overt discrimination, slavery, 150 years. After slavery, only about 13 or 14% of black people could even read. And so I'm reading a book now on Ida B. Wells, and they're talking about what the slaves were doing after after they were freed. And the organizations, the fraternal organizations, the churches, their primary focus was on teaching people how to read so they could function in this society. And that was their primary function, so they could be able to perform certain chores and duties, what have you. So they wasn't thinking about financial literacy. They were thinking about how to read and how to make a living.
But if you look at our communities then, especially in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, our dollar is circulating in our community up to 100 times. There's no dollar circulating in this community more than an African American dollar, primarily because it is.
At that time, yes.
Yeah,
at that time.
Because right. Exactly.
Before
But I'm talking.
yes.
So no, we're segregated at that point.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So our dollar circulates 100 times in our community. We're business owners. We're manufacturers. You know, we own hotels.
Yes,
we own
true.
Nickelodeons. We own planes. What happens? I mean, so when you say that we weren't financially literate or we weren't thinking about financial literacy, but we were, because there were millionaires that were made even during that time.
Well, we were more interested in how to make a living and how to make a living and how to provide for our families, how to keep ourselves from being arrested by the police, which under separate but equal. So we had other priorities. We couldn't vote. We couldn't live where we wanted to live. So we had other priorities, and our first priorities was taking care of our family and that kind of thing.
So, do you know who Sarah Rector is?
No, I'm not familiar.
So Sarah Rector is a little black girl who's in Oklahoma. She's part of the Dawes Rolls. The Dawes, D-A-W-E-S, Rolls, R-O-L-L-S. They're part of the Creek Nation, the Creek Indians. So Oklahoma was a Indian territory.
Right.
So in the early 1900s, the United States government takes Oklahoma back from the Creek Indians and they give them property.
Right.
Well, part of the Creek Indians are some African Americans that were once slaves to the Creeks that are still part of them. So they give each of the children 160 acres. Okay. Sarah Rector gets 160 acres. It's in barren land. It's 75 miles from her home. They have to pay $30 a year in taxes. And in 1904, $30 is a lot of money. So her father tries to give the property back to Oklahoma. And they say, not only are we not taking this property back, if you don't pay the taxes, you're going to jail. So he has to muster up $30 a year to pay these taxes. And then there's this company called Standard Oil that comes to town. Standard Oil decides that they want to drill on Sarah Rector's property. So when they start drilling on Sarah Rector's property, she gets a royalty, and they strike oil. When they strike oil, Sarah Rector is around 9 years old, and she starts getting about $100, $150 a day. That grows to $300. Now we're talking about the 1910, 1911 now. That grows to $300 a day, then $500, $1,500. She's making $2,500 a day. By the time she's 12 years old, she's the richest black girl, little girl in the United States. She's a millionaire. By the time she's 14, they pass legislation to make her a white woman. So Sarah Rector is in the stock market. She owns different properties and such, and then the market crashes. And people think that everybody who was in the stock market lost money, but not everybody who was in the stock market lost money. Some people made off like bandits when the market crashed. But the market crashes, you know, and we know what happens. But the market comes back. And to me, it seems that if there was ever a time for us to get into the stock market, you know, it was going to be after all these Jim Crow, separate but equal, segregation, all these parameters, all of these barriers moved out the way, and we go into the 60s, and we still...
Well, Jay, we're the first generation that really had money. We weren't allowed into the corporations and the boards and the executive positions or the superintendents of the school districts until the mid-60s and late 60s. And so we're new to this game. This is brand new to us. We weren't allowed in to those positions that made a lot of money. We had a few doctors and we had lawyers that made some money, and we had some business owners that made some money. But the majority of us were stuck and relegated to very low positions, very low wage paying positions. So we just barely had enough money to pay our rent, our food, some transportation expenses. So majority of us were just barely making it. We were on the borderline. One paycheck away from homelessness, one paycheck away from being on the street. So this is all having money. This is very new to us. This is something new to majority of us. There's always been a few of us that had.
But so, and there was, so in your head, there was nobody amongst us that could have the conversation about financial literacy or about investing small amounts of money into stocks. Is that what you're saying?
Not at that time. Not at that time. There may be a few doctors or lawyers, or there may have been a maid that worked for Mr. Charlie, and he may have told her dad about this particular stock or this particular investment. But the majority of us didn't have that kind of access.
Right.
That kind of information. And to be frank about it, Jay, nobody did. The majority of the white population didn't have that information in. That was set aside for a very select few, even for them. Like I said, financial literacy education is not taught anywhere. I had to learn it through trial and error myself. I came up on the 10 principles that I have in that book through my own experiences. I have a BA in economics. They didn't teach me about the wealth building principles. They taught me about the multiplier effect and the revenue for this business and the expenses. So these are things that I had to learn by trial and error. And one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because I wanted people to know what I know. I don't want people to go through what I had to go through, And I feel a little bit of my, leave a little bit of legacy. I'm feeling a little bit of my immortality. So I wanted to leave those for some people, the young people, the adults that are.
But how can we even expect the young people to know anything if we knew nothing? Because the story that you're telling me is that at no time did we ever have the ability to gain wealth through investment.
Very, very limited. Very, very limited. But I'm saying it wasn't just African Americans. It was the whole general population.
I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know. I mean, I want to.
Well, let me say this,
because
Jay.
I didn't live during those times, but.
There were people that were successful. There were always successful black businessmen, no doubt about it. But the majority of us didn't have those options, those opportunities,
and
those jobs.
What opportunities were those? So we didn't have the opportunity to invest in the market. Is what you're saying? We didn't have the
money to invest in the market.
Well, I mean,
that requires discretionary income.
So what's discretionary? What would be discretionary to you?
Discretionary income would be.
So what if I save pennies? Could I? Because, I had two aunts. They were my great aunts. They were my father's aunties.
Right.
So they were my great aunts, and they never worked. I never saw them work as a kid.
Right.
And it wasn't until I got older that I was talking to my dad one day, and I said, "What did Aunt Naomi and Aunt Sunita do?"
Right.
And he said, they didn't do nothing. They worked as young women, and they bought a lot of stocks and Coca-Cola and Standard Oil and a couple of other things. And he said, and they started making money off of the dividends.
Exactly.
And so they lived off their dividends. They never worked again. So.
Well, your experience is not what most black people's experience is.
Well, that wasn't my experience.
Well, I mean,
I didn't grow up. But what I'm saying is that is it fair to say that when it comes to us, that a lot of times people in our community that had access didn't share, didn't help.
Well, Jay, let me say this here. The top 1% in this country owns 54% of the wealth in the stock market.
Right.
The top 10% owns 87%
Right.
of the wealth in the stock market. So that just leaves the other 13% for everybody else.
Right.
So that means there's a whole lot of people that don't have the money to invest
So
in the
what I'm
stock
asking
market.
you though is, have we, have those of us that have, so to speak, made it out, kind of kept it to themselves? Is it fair to say that, or?
It's some of those, but Jay, this is all brand new for us. I have to talk about where we are presently. Presently, if you live in Baltimore, the average person, the net worth of an African American in Baltimore, Maryland, is $40
Right now.
right now. And if you reflect back 150 years, a slave was worth $40 in Baltimore. It's projected by the year 2053.
Now, a slave was worth more than that.
Well,
Slaves were selling for
in Mississippi they were a lot more because cotton was doing very, very well.
even back then, the slaves were going for more than that even back then, unless you were an older slave and you were on your last leg.
But Jay, in 2053, it's estimated that half of African Americans will have zero net worth if we keep going in the direction that we're going. Presently, we have an average net worth, which means if we take everything that we own and we subtract the credit card payments, the house loan, that tells you what your net worth is. The average African American family is $17,150 versus $175,000.
Right. The white counterparts.
And the reason for that is overt, covert racism, systematic discrimination, redlining. For instance, Jay, half of the middle class wealth in this country is of half of the middle class. I'm not talking about the wealthiest. I'm talking about the middle class, the people making between $40,000 and $100,000. Half of their wealth is tied up in their home. We couldn't live in the suburbs. We were redlined. We couldn't live out in the suburbs.
Right, but you said now we got to. Now you just said, but now you say now we.
Now we can.
Okay.
Now,
so
the option.
I want to tell you guys something. So had you been in the market, in the stock market, as an option buyer, and option trader, and you bought Apple, the $390 call, at $123 a contract, you could have walked away. If you bought it on March 4th, you'd have paid $123. If you'd have sold it by July 14th, you'd have took that $123 and turned it into somewhere between $5,800 and $6,500. If you held it longer, you could have probably got $9,000, $10,000 out of it. We're going to talk about that when we come back, about the market, about financial literacy, and facts about what we can do now to change the direction of our lives, because a lot of it, in my opinion, has to do with the way we think, not necessarily the money we don't have. But who am I? We'll be right back.
Change the quality of your life? We've got you.
Want your high school diploma? We got you.
Want to obtain your Class A driver's license?
Or study to become a medical assistant?
Want to learn to work with children?
Or be prepared to work in an office setting? We got you.
Need childcare? We got you.
Need help with transportation?
Is independent study a better option for you? We got you.
Improve the quality of life for you and your family. And remember, we've got you.
All right, you guys, we're back. J. King Live, Straight No Chaser. We're talking about financial literacy. And I got to tell you guys, I believe that we can change our whole community if we start having conversations about financial literacy and what it means to be financial literate. And part of financial literacy for me is investing, our willingness to learn how to be investors, especially in the stock market. And while it is, and I know, and I've got to tell you guys, I'm not speaking to you as a know-it-all, because just a few years ago, I wasn't in the stock market. It was a friend of mine, Thaxter Arterberry, who pushed me in the direction to do it, because I would always say my accountant does that kind of work. I don't have to worry about that. I do what I do. But once I got in the market and started investing, and I saw the kind of gains that you could make, especially when it came to options trading, I was hooked. But I wasn't hooked for me. I was hooked for my community. I felt like, wow, we can change our community overnight. If money is our issue, if we started sharing information, if we started making sure that if we knew something, that we passed it along, that we could literally change the way growth financially happened in our community. And we can take the idea of the need for money and not take it away, but we can make it where it's not so heavy on us. But it requires us to think different. It requires us to challenge ourselves and to wipe away some of the fear that we have, and fears that I understand, and I know that there's a systemic issue of racism and bigotry and prejudices that exist in this country, always have been for black folks, so it's not a new dance for us. But what I learned about the market is nobody knows what color I am, nor do they care. See, they can't take my contract that I buy or stock that I buy and make it any different than anybody else's. They only care about the money. And if you were in the market when Apple split or Tesla split, then you saw your fortunes grow even more by 4 times if it was Apple, by 5 times if it was Tesla, because you got the benefit of not right now, but later as your asset grows. In the studio with me is David Fontaine. David, he's written a book. It's called The Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible. So tell me what's in the book. What's in the book that's valuable for people?
Oh, well, Jay, one of the things that's in the book, and you talked about it earlier, is about having the right mindset. You have to have the right mindset, but you also have to have the right actions to go along with that mindset as well. You can make a whole lot of money, but if you don't have the right mindset, we all know of millionaires and basketball players and athletes who've been very successful, made a lot of money. But because they valued spending over saving, spending over owning, then as a result of that, they didn't invest their money wisely and take advantage of the opportunity that they had. And so one of the things that you have to do, one of the things that you can do as an individual, it's like a carpenter is going to build a house. He has to have tools to build a house. In order to build wealth, you have to have certain tools. Financial literacy is your tool. One of the first things of financial literacy is your savings. You have a different kind of savings accounts. You have the the passbook account, you have the high yield account. Then you have the investing. That's another tool that you can use to build wealth. You have investing in the stock market. You can buy individual stocks like Apple that have done very, very well. And then you can buy even a bundle of stocks that's put together in a group in a mutual fund, if that works for you with the more balanced approach. But there's generally more risk if you buy one stock. You can also, of course, invest in real estate. 20%, 90% of the millionaires that have been made in the last 20 years have been investors in real estate. So you have to know about investment property. You have to know what it takes to get in for a down payment. What your cash flow is going to be after you have that investment. So those are the tools, but also you have to know, Jay, you have to know once you get the money, you have to know how to keep the money.
But if I go by what you're telling me, I don't have the money and I never will because I never had access to it.
Jay, most people have the money. If you budget properly now at the incomes and the salaries that we're making right now, we spend 25% more of our wealth on cars and purses and shoes than any other community.
Wow, 25%?
25% more. We spend 87% of all ethnic beauty supply shops are purchased by all African Americans. But you know what?
87%.
87%. But 70% of the stores are owned by Korean Americans. So I'm happy to say I'm seeing some very optimistic signs. For instance, there's 3 sisters in South Sacramento called Nubian Beauty Supply 3 years ago. They went into a store, a Korean store, and they weren't treated very well. They were dissatisfied with the service. And you know, they'd been doing one another's hair and that kind of thing, and they said, we can do this. So what they did, they put their expertise together. They put their money together, and they opened up a beauty supply place in the incubator, which is owned by Thomas Donaldson on Florin Road.
Right.
And when I first went in there and interviewed them for my book, there's a success story in my book. When I first went in there and interviewed them for the book, they had about maybe 200 square feet. If you go in there now, they got 1,500 square feet.
Wow.
They're doing health, they're doing hair treatment, they're selling conditioners, lotions, and you know what? They're going to franchise. They're going to be a franchise. That's a template. Then they can sell that brand, Nubian, throughout the country. That's wealth building. And so those are some very exciting things I'm seeing. But you know what? African Americans are very receptive to learning about investment, options market, as you're talking about, investing in real estate. But there has to be that trust. That trust. I found in my experience in speaking to my clients, everybody wants to make money, Jay. Everybody wants to make money. Everybody wants to do better. Everybody wants to have a better house. Everybody wants to retire with hopefully without a home payment. Everybody wants to take a vacation. Everybody wants to have a nice car. Everybody wants their children to do better than they did.
Right.
And so they were very receptive to my advice, but they got to trust you. They have to believe you. You have to form a relationship with them over time. But they're ready. But our leaders haven't been ready. The people in some cases are ahead of the leaders, Jay. Because we're still talking about, I've seen people, nothing wrong with marching in the street. There's a place for that. But Jay, if we spent the amount of energy that we spent in marching and protesting, half that energy on financial literacy and educating our communities on what they can do with their wealth, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. Let me say this too, one thing, Jay.
Okay.
One of the things that Eric Garner and George Floyd, what did they have in common? They were both trying to make a living for their family. Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes.
You think he was trying to make a living for his family?
He was trying to make money, yes. He was trying to make money, yes. And
selling loose cigarettes?
Yeah, selling loose cigarettes. What did George Floyd, they say he was passing a counterfeit $20 bill. Think of all the other African American men that are in prison today because they thought the only way they can make a living for themselves was to do something illegal. There is another way. There's another options. And if we have to be involved in this individually, there's things you can do individually as a family. You can learn about credit. Because if you got poor credit, you may not even get that car or house or loan that you want to get. If you got good credit, and they do approve you, and you got a good score, you're going to get that loan a lot better interest rate.
Right.
Which means there's going to be more money in your pocket to invest, to put in the stock market, to invest in real estate, to have that home. And you know what's so important about owning a home is that 66% of African American businesses, they got the capital to begin their business
from their home.
The equity in their home. That's why home ownership is so important. We weren't really given the opportunity to really own homes until the 60s, really, in many cases, because we were locked out. The federal government had policies that prevented us from purchasing in the suburbs. They had covenants that prevented us from to purchase in certain neighborhoods. And then we're locked into the inner city in many of those cases where the depreciation, you're locked in, where you couldn't get a loan for a home improvement, where the depreciation is quite a bit less. So if you wanted to improve your home or buy a second, those options were not available to you. But now, Jay, those options are available. The community is ready. you know, our leadership has come from a position of out of the civil rights movement. And they were concerned, first of all, of course, about voting rights,
And civil
about
rights.
how civil rights, about housing. Those are very critical. And I'll tell you, the black church has always had a history of leadership in our community. And you know what? Thinking back, the black church, when slaves were freed, they were the ones that instituted the programs for reading and the literacy programs and providing room and shelter for people that didn't have it. So the black church has always been an integral part of our community. But you know what? The civil rights movement would not have been successful but for the black church. They not only provided the moral leadership, they provided the shock troops. Most of those people that you saw testing, well, and you know
but
okay,
if we're going to talk about what made the civil rights movement powerful, was the bus boycott.
Yes.
So the bus boycott, because the bus boycott dealt with the economic structure.
No doubt about it.
And when blacks stopped riding buses, it shut them down.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. You're right.
And so the reason why we were able to ride on the front of the bus or anywhere on the bus is because we said, we're not riding on the bus at all. That's how powerful we are.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, our economic power is more in place today than even then. So for me, marching would mean nothing if we said, you know what, we're going to sit down and stay home and not spend nothing. If we did that, and we did that for a week, and we just shut down, we shut down America.
I agree with you, Jay. But let me say this, Jay. Getting back to the black church, it's still the most vibrant. If we're to turn this around, it's going to take individuals, it's going to take families, and it's going to take our black church, it's going to take our fraternities, it's going to take our sororities. You have that hour meeting, take 15% of it for financial literacy. You know, you know what the black church spends a year? They take in $12 billion a year in tithes.
Yeah, but they take it in, but they don't. So I mean, so we'd have to have a whole nother conversation about the black church.
I'm just talking about what we can do.
Yeah.
What's available out there that can be done.
I think we have to engage our young people. Yeah. If we're not, you know, I think there's a big gap between young and old in the black community.
That's correct.
And if we don't start talking about financial literacy with our young people, because there's a Michael Jordan or a Serena Williams or a Tiger Woods or a Michael Jackson of stock investing that we haven't developed, that we haven't mined yet, but we need to. So I believe that when our young people, when you see our young black men out here and you see them hopeless and you see them in gangs and you see them angry, it's because we haven't given them anything to feel good about as a community. We haven't. Well, that's we haven't shown them anything that's hopeful. I believe that this is the conversation that starts hopefulness in our community among young people. They just gave me the 2-minute warning. So what that means is that we're going to come back in 2 minutes after this commercial. Keisha Matthews will probably come out here with questions or statements, and we'll go into the second phase of this program, J. King Live, Straight No Chasers. We're talking about financial literacy, and I got to tell you guys, next week I have Daryl James on this program, and we're going to be talking about the Donald Trump 10-point plan. We're going to be talking about Trump versus Biden, and we're going to talk about black leadership and a whole bunch of other things. If there is ever a conversation that you want to listen to Daryl James. He's a heavy brother, and he is out there with it, and he ain't afraid of it. And so it's going to be a great conversation. Dave Fontaine is my guest right now. He's written the book, The Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible. When we come back, we're going to tell you where you can find it. We'll be right back.
Change the quality of your life? We've got you.
Want your high school diploma? We got you.
Want to obtain your Class A driver's license?
Or study to become a medical assistant?
Want to learn to work with children?
Or be prepared to work in an office setting? We got you.
Need childcare? We got you. Need help with transportation?
Is independent study a better option for you? We got you.
Improve the quality of life for you and your family. And remember, we've got you.
All right, we're back. J King Live, straight no chaser. David Fontaine is my guest. The Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible he's written. Dave, where can people find this?
You can find it on Amazon.com books. Also, you can find it at Underground Books in Sacramento. We're going to be getting a few more copies over to them.
Okay.
Underground Books. But you
So
can find
people,
it there as well.
and that's David Fontaine, Fontaine, David W. Fontaine, the Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible. And you have a lot of practical things in here I'm looking at, a lot of information. And you center around the church. You said this is a lot of this is centered around the church, I'm seeing.
That's where I got my principles from. I transfer those principles from the church, and I think those same principles, the concept can be applied to financial literacy and wealth building.
And I see you wrote something on group investing. So people who aren't, who don't feel like they have enough money to do it on their own, they can get with a group of friends. And so tell me, how does, because the trust thing is an issue amongst us. So
big issue.
In group investing, how would, how do we get past the trust issue in this deal?
First of all, you got to get to know the people. Like I said, my individual clients knew me. I had built up a relationship with them over time. So you're going to get to know people, your friends, neighbors. Start with your family. Members in your family is entrepreneurial. If you need money to invest or capital to start a business, or if you have a young man in the family, encourage them, support them. So, but one of the things that has been done, Jay, is that you have a concept, you call it the kubuka. Like when you get 10 people. And what they do, they all want to go into business or be in business for themselves. So what that group does, they finance one individual at a time. As that individual goes out and starts their business and successful, then they finance another one. So, but you have to have a business plan. You have to have shown that you've been have the passion, have the persistence, have the willingness to learn, to have the marketing plan, that kind of thing before you get financed. But that's one of the ways you can do it. But start with your family first. If you can't get the capital from your family, go to that concept. And it works very well with other communities.
I think Keisha, you have questions or statements?
We have 4 questions from the viewing audience. The first question says, "Hi Jay, please provide your audience with the best way to learn more about options trading." Rochelle Elder on Facebook.
Okay, Rochelle, so there are many books and videos on YouTube that deal with options trading. I tend to trade differently than what is shown. I just believe to buy longer and to buy differently. It's a lot safer. But we have the Greater Financial Literacy Group. We meet every first and third Wednesday, and our group is on Facebook, the Greater Sacramento Financial Literacy Group, and anybody can come to our meetings. They're on Zoom. Our president is Kwani Crawford. Our vice president is Angela Lowe, and if you join us there, they'll send you out information.
Okay. How would you handle or recommend we handle and manage credit card debt?
Credit card debt's a very good question. I think that the first thing you got to do, you have to know what credit consists of. Oh, excuse me. You have to know what credit consists. Your credit score goes from a score of 300 to 850. And the best way to manage credit card debt, first of all, is to pay your bills on time. Because if you don't pay your score is made up of 5 main criteria. And the first one that makes up 35% of your score is whether you pay on time. If you don't pay on time, your first late payment can knock off up to 75 to 100 points off your credit score. But credit card companies, they want to give you credit. They want you to buy for them, but they want you to buy for them their products and their services. But you got to prove that you're able to pay it back. one of the another ways to manage your credit is to pay off the high interest loans that you had first. Those that have the highest interest, you want to get away from those, because you want as much money as possible to save and invest, whether it's the stock market, whether it's buying a home, whether it's options. So get rid of that high interest credit card debt and stay away from the payday loans. That's the best way. And I think another very important concept too is keep your debt utilization rate on your credit cards below 30%. So if you have a $1,000 credit card, don't charge more than $300 on that particular credit card. That'll keep your score very low. That'll give you the maximum score for that credit utilization rate.
Let me say this, because I think that most people, if they could do that, they probably wouldn't have credit. People that have credit because they need it, because they're struggling. If you're going to pay off and you want to pay down your credit card debt, this is what I did when at one time when I had real high credit. I would just pay. I would pick one card to pay down, and I would pay that card. I would pay as much as I can on that one card, and the other cards I would pay the minimum until I got one card paid down as low as I could, and I would probably start with the highest interest rate card, and then I would go to the next highest interest rate card, and I'd do the same thing with that card till I paid it, till I had everything paid off. And at that point, and then I would do like Dave said, then you can maintain management of how much you're going to spend on each card, and you never let it get at 30%. But most times when people are asking those questions, it's because you're already past that point. So I say, you concentrate on your highest interest rate card first, you get it paid down to a respectable number, and then you pick another card, and then you pay them down individually till you pay your whole debt down. It might take you a year or two, but what happens is once you get them paid down, I promise you, it's hard for you to want to put something else on them again.
So another question by Derek Spruill is, how do we empower black families to educate their young?
Listen, I think that, and I'll let you speak about this in just a second. I think that you have to start doing, you have to start talking about if you're not financially literate, you have to start talking about the importance of it to your young children, to your young people. But they have to see you change your life. They have to see you change the way you approach financial literacy. And you have to be honest enough to say, no one spoke to me about this, and so I'm speaking to you about it so that you don't end up in the same boat that I'm in. And you can change your life a lot quicker than I'm changing mine. But just know that once you start making that change, that it has to be consistent. It has to be a lifestyle change. You can't just do it just for the time period. You have to change your lifestyle.
What I would say, fortunately, I would say, is that I'm glad that there's books out now on the subject. So there are books that you can buy. There's a site, Dr. Boyce Watkins has a book, a very good book for financial literacy for youngsters from 3 different age groups. That's where you can start. But also, I think I have 10 principles on building wealth in my book, and I have things in my books that you can do and begin to teach your kids about financial. And you got to know yourself, because most of us don't know about it. So you got to teach yourself before you can teach your kids. You got to feel comfortable with that, and on building wealth. But it's not only about teaching financial literacy; it's what your children see you do.
Right.
For instance, Jay, you mentioned earlier that one of our businesses don't have a lot of revenue. The average business has $75,000 in revenue versus $450 for the majority at large. We have to be intentional about our habits. There are over 160,000 black people in Sacramento. If 3,000 of those black people once a month, you can still go to Red Lobster, you can still go, but once a month, go to an African American restaurant and spend $50. If 3,000 black people in Sacramento spent $50 a month at an African American restaurant, that comes to over $1 million. Over $1 million $1,500,000. If you divide that by 15 restaurants, that means that each restaurant's going to have $150,000 in revenue. That means they can hire more people that look like you, that have the same values that you have. That those restaurants mentorship your kids. They hire your kids. They support social service organizations. They support the arts. They support the culture to make your life a whole lot fuller. That's one simple way that you can increase the revenue by over 150% for black business, just by changing our habits, just how we invest. Once a month, 3,000 people. That takes that.
Okay, you just said that.
Right,
okay.
Okay.
You about to beat the dead horse down.
It's so much good can come.
That
come
was
of
very
that.
good. I don't want to interrupt you. So the last question that we have is, what will we do if not many get into the stock market or stop spending? What other options can we have or do we have to do better?
I would like to say this here. If you are working and have a job, most employers offer a 401k. And what they will do, they will generally up to 5 or 6% of your salary, they will put in this particular plan. A lot of employers will match that. But one of the problems we have, talking about education again, Jay, is that we put 10% less in, and 20% of us don't even participate. And that's free money. If they're matching your money, that's free money that they're providing you. And that has dire consequences as far as your retirement is concerned. That means you won't be able to retire at 65 because you didn't take full advantage of the employer 401k option that was available to you, that matched the funds that were presented to you. So we have to participate more when we have a job. We have to put more in. But right now we're putting less in and we're not participating. So those are the things that cause you to have us to have such a wide divergence in our wealth versus the majority population's wealth. Another thing I must mention, Jay, as far as inheritance is concerned, we leave 9% of us leave something. But 30% of the majority population leaves something. So we're starting out from scratch versus the majority population. So another thing that I really like to talk about is that college. We have less financial wealth, but we graduate from college with twice as much debt than the other groups.
Can I interrupt you right there?
Yes.
Because that's one of the questions is, what would be your advice on paying off student loans quickly by LaVon Gray?
Well, I know I see advertised on TV, a lot of the different banks are talking about they can give you the best rate possible. But the best thing you can do is have a budget and live within that budget and put aside a certain amount of money every month to accelerate your payment on that student loan debt. But another thing I must say is that there's nothing wrong with going to junior college for 2 years.
Yeah, but I know, but we're talking about somebody who had the debt. They want to know what to do. You accelerate it, but and you know, so.
But I'm talking about for those that are thinking about going. If you go to junior college, your degree still says you graduated from Sac State or UC Berkeley.
I understand
it doesn't
that.
say you went to American River for 2 years.
Right, but I think she was asking specifically, how does she pay out? You know, if she got debt, how do you pay it off? I think, you know, like you said, you accelerate it and try to pay it off quicker.
Right.
Than probably what's prescribed. But that's where investing comes in. That's where, to me, so let me just say, you know, you can have the 401k. I have a 401k from the company that I worked with, but it didn't help me. It didn't help me become a better investor. It didn't help me understand the market because I wasn't participating in that part. You cannot today be involved in this world looking for wealth and not be an investor. You can't get around it. And don't let nobody tell you you can, because you can't. Not only can you not get around it, you better today try to find as many people as you can to help. And that can help you. Because we're not going to do this as individuals. We're going to do this as groups. The Greater Financial Literacy Group started with 20 people. We're now on over 358 and growing. And the wealth inside our group is growing. And it's because we help each other. It's because we share with each other. It's because we talk to each other. It's because we help each other through fears and anxieties. And it's because we know the importance of growing our community, especially economically and from a wealth standpoint. So I say to you all, make it today the beginning of you saying, I am going to be fearless in learning how to get into the market. Yes.
How do you suggest one begin to invest in real estate if you don't have a lot of extra cash for a down payment? And that's Fanny Chin.
Well, you know what's interesting, Fanny, is Keisha Matthews is the one who's reading the question, and she's an expert when it comes to the real estate market.
Exactly.
And so you try to find people like her. She does a show here on every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. called Selling Sacramento. You should tune in to her on KDEE. If you're not in Sacramento, she's Agent Key on, or Keisha Matthews on Facebook. You find people like her. You find people that will mentor you, people that are doing different and interesting things as it relates to investing and bringing partners together. But you find people that you already know that are in the game and that are doing that work.
Can I add to what you just said?
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Fanny, one of the things that you can do when you're trying to get into the real estate arena, if you don't have a lot of cash, look at what you do have and leverage with somebody else. Maybe you have the better credit score. Maybe you have access to resources. Find someone with the cash and you combine your credit score and your resources and you put a deal together like that.
See, what's going to happen in today's world, you guys, is none of us are going to get through this by ourselves. It's how you partner, how you leverage, and how you build allegiances and alliances that are going to actually catapult you and grow you and build you. And believe it or not, then you're all a debt to somebody else. You have to do the same thing. And it's through osmosis that communities change and that we're going to change. I can look at my cameraman looking at his watch, and just him looking at his watch tells me that we're close to the end of this. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. You can find us here again every Monday from 8 to 9 p.m. We have 2 more shows left in this season. Next Monday with Daryl James, and then the following Monday on the 28th with Mark Harris. He's a professor, he's a lawyer, he's a political aficionado and a pretty smart guy. And those will be the last 2 shows that we do for this season on J. King Live, Straight, No Chaser. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Mr. David Fontaine was our guest. You can find his book, The Black Financial Literacy and Wealth Building Bible, on Amazon, or if you're in Sacramento at Underground Books. Good night. We'll see you guys next week on J. King Live, Straight, No Chaser.
J. King Live.